Hi, it's Warren Huart here. Hope you're doing marvelously well, and we are here at AES number 139. So let's go in and check it out. Pretty darn busy. I'm with Andrew Scheps. How are you, mate?
Good to see you, Warren.
Good to see you too. We were just talking about the BAE episode that you said
we were. I'm only halfway through because there's only so much gear you can look at in one sitting. Yeah, phenomenal.
Yeah, Joe loves his gear.
Yes, and I love Joe.
I love him too. Yeah. He answers like, whenever I'm like, what is, I was talking to him because I used to have a pair of pies and they sort of got borrowed by somebody and never came back. This is like 20 years ago when I still lived in England. And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, oh, you mean these? And I was just like, really? Is this something that I used to have at least that you don't have?
Probably your pair. He's the guy.
So now you tell me you're living in England at the moment. What are you working on over there?
Well, whatever I'd be working on anywhere.
I see.
The record business has decided I'm a mixer now. I'm not really doing a whole lot of recording or production.
You're a mixer now.
I'm a mixer. That's all I do, which is good. So I'm super portable. I'm 100% in the box and have been for a couple of years.
Right.
So now my rig fits in a backpack. And I just need a pair of speakers in a room to put them in.
That's wonderful. You know, we should talk about that for a second because I interviewed Neil a couple of weeks ago. He just mixed the whole Cerberus record, which is tracked in Electric Lady with lots of nice microphones and pre's and stuff in the box.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of emphasis put on summing, and this is going to really mess up a lot of manufacturers. I don't think summing's that important if you recorded it really well in the first place.
Yeah, I've got a lot of theories about summing, which are way too long to go into here. But yeah, part of moving from mixing on a large Neve to in the box meant breaking down the process and figuring out which parts were important and which weren't. And I decided very early on that the summing was not one of the important parts at all.
I agree.
And it's just for me. There are other people whose work I respect immensely who will do a mix in the box and then just split it out to their summing network, and it's always better and they love it.
Right.
And that's great. But for me, whatever I mix into sounds better. I can't change it after the fact.
Right.
And there was no upside to it. It made me less portable and it didn't sound better to me. So, but it's just me.
No, but I understand. For me, it's like one of the things I'd like to educate kids, and when I say kids, I mean any of us that's, you know, watching this stuff. If you had like one nice Class A mic pre, one 312, one 1073, you know, that probably would make more of a difference because
absolutely. The recording, but once it's in there, there isn't a compelling need to bring it out.
Yeah.
Just get it in there, great.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Because even Chris, I interviewed Chris Alaugi last week, and that was one of his big points. Is like, you know, give me stuff that's better recorded and it's easy to mix and it makes sense.
Absolutely.
Commit in a much more, you know, in a better way.
Yeah.
So, but I think if there's a summing market out there, it might be for the guys that only have their little Focusrite pre, which is no disrespect to Focusrite, it's a $200 piece of equipment.
Yeah.
Maybe they're the guys that would benefit from an 8-channel summer with transformers, because then what they're doing is they're adding transformers and some weight in there. Which
I mean, but all you need to do is think about, well, what is a transformer?
Sure.
Well, it doesn't pass DC. It gives you a very low high-pass filter and a very high-pass filter, low-pass filter, and it gives you some harmonic distortion. So you can do that in other ways if you want to. It's painstaking if you're trying to mimic what a transformer does, or you can just slam it through some transformers. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's important. The biggest thing for me is not to think it's a magic box, though. It's a box that's doing stuff, and if you know what it's doing, you can decide whether that needs to be done or not. And the real reason I think thinking about it that way is important is because there's so many people who are on their way up, you know, or trying to become good. And they give themselves the excuse that they don't yet own a certain piece of hardware or a plug. Like, it doesn't matter.
I agree. And
Chad Blake could mix anything on the planet better than me with like 2 plugins, and it'd be fine. It's not about that.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that too, because my journey was not one of like, I didn't come up as an assistant engineer. I was a musician. I didn't accumulate credits by working on lots and lots of records. I got bands signed and sort of came up the way, especially as a writer and developing bands. So for me, it's like, I understand the world that a lot of kids are in now, because they don't have the benefit of going to work at studios, because there's like 8 left.
Yeah.
You
Are there 8 still?
Yeah, maybe 7. Yeah.
What time is it?
Yeah, exactly.
6?
So, yeah, it's up to us to, and you're preaching to the choir here, and I think that's wonderful because it's up to us to help these guys understand that, yes, just because you don't have a $15,000 U47 going into a vintage Neve, going into whatever it is, it doesn't mean you can't make great music. Dave Jordan once told me this, and I'm sorry if I'm waffling, but he once said, name your 5 favorite albums, and I started to name them, and he's like, not one of those is actually very well recorded. It's like Plastic Ono Band. That's one of my favorite albums ever. And it's like totally punk rock,
Yeah.
Working Class Hero, for instance, they punched in on a different guitar. You can hear it, it goes steel strung, classical, steel strung. It's like,
Yeah.
can you imagine like nowadays people are like, oh my God, they use the, I can't believe that,
And it works because you're used to it. And
Yeah.
at the time it's a feature
Yeah.
because it's a detail or something. But yeah. So not to downplay the importance of great sounding gear.
No,
because
of
great
course.
sounding gear sounds great. And especially while you're recording, it's all
Yes.
that matters.
Yeah,
But there are plenty of records that sound terrible that are awesome.
amazing. Led Zepp 1, I'm sorry, it's a great sounding record, but is it a hi-fi sounding record? No. But is it covered in amazing performances by 19 to 25-year-old guys?
Absolute Sabbath records. I mean,
Oh,
all
yeah.
that kind of stuff. They're, at the moment, you put it on and it sounds a little thin. It's got way too much reverb
Yeah.
on it. But if you just listen to it, it's still awesome.
The first Sabbath record. I remember just hearing it for the first time and just holding up the picture of like this ghostly, is it a witch? What is it walking through the forest? I still get, my hands are still standing on it at the moment, just thinking about that first time.
And made in 2 days.
And made in 2 days. Probably on a 4-track. There's no way that was even an 8-track.
I don't even know.
Yeah.
But I know a day to record, a day to mix, or maybe it's just 2 days of recording because mixing wasn't a thing. I don't know, but pretty impressive.
Even Hunker Dory was like done in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And that's like a production masterpiece, even by today's standard.
Yeah.
Thank you ever so much for talking.
Absolutely, Warren. Good to see you.
I really appreciate it, and I love the fact that you are, you really believe in the same philosophy I do, and I think it's so important. It's all about creativity. That is the most important.
Yeah.
Thank you,
The
mate.
only.
The only important thing. Better still. So, Mike, tell us about this. This is the Lewitt USB mic. I like this idea, but I need to know all about it because I haven't actually used one of these yet.
Haven't you?
No, this is my.
All right, well, let's start with the DGT 650. That's the one we introduced last year.
Right.
And that is sort of the flagship within the series of DGT.
Yeah.
It has 2 capsules,
Yeah.
so it allows you to do a stereo recording, XY 90 degrees.
Amazing.
And as you can see over here, it has 4 modes. The first mode is the stereo mode, where you can actually do that stereo, as I just said.
Right.
And the second mode, the 2 capsules form one cardioid pattern, and you have a mono. The third one is what we refer to as a singer-songwriter mode, because with the breakout box that comes with the product, it allows you to record your voice in mono and use this as a line input. So you can put a guitar in there and record your voice and guitar at the very same time.
Wow.
The fourth mode is a stereo line in mode that actually shuts down the capsules, and you can use this as a stereo line in. So if you have a feed of your mixing console, which you want to record and overdub later, you use that.
Wonderful.
In all of the modes, you have MIDI available, MIDI input. So if you want to run a sequencer or a synthesizer or a drum machine.
So my dumb question would be,
yes,
because people are going to ask dumb questions, and I'm going to ask them because I don't know the answer. So I could basically just have my laptop with my DAW and this on.
Correct.
Nice.
There's not a dumb question. It's
It's not like it's like keeping it simple. That's great. So
well, that's what we try to do because essentially this is iOS compatible.
Right. Great.
Essentially, if you are out there on the road and you only want to do your voice recording, you plug this in.
Yeah.
You plug this into your iPhone or iPad.
Yeah. I saw the connection.
And essentially what it does is opening up thank you. And you would open up the recorder app.
Wow, it's great.
You would hit new recording.
Does the app come with the mic?
Yes.
Beautiful.
So you can see here at the bottom it says device DGT 650, so it recognizes the device immediately.
Go up to 96K and 32 bit.
Absolutely, 32-bit, 96K. Let's do And actually, you can make a picture for you to remember where you were. So if we are here and actually make the picture there, and then I say use photo, and then all of a sudden you have a visual memory of where you were when you would make that recording.
That's great. The hotel room, you're on tour,
Exactly.
you're writing songs on the road.
So then you go into recording, you start recording. Let me go to the tools just to show you that.
Right.
You can do your input monitoring, your playback track. Essentially, we just updated the app by adding
Compressor in it?
Yep, by having a mixer in there, by having a compressor in there, as well as by having a bit of reverb.
How many tracks on the mixer?
Well, essentially you have 2 tracks, but you can overdub as many times as you would want.
Many times as you'd like.
Exactly.
There you go.
You can insert, you can append, you can overdub. So you can do, it's your real mobile studio.
How much is it?
It's mapping at 579 in the US.
Nice.
And what's new for this show is essentially the little brother, which is the DGT 450, which is essentially the same concept. So it has a built-in interface. There's no need to have an external interface and stuff like that. Plugs in directly into iOS. It has a monitor.
That would be
It doesn't come with that breakout box, although if you want to, you can buy it as an accessory later
How much
on.
is the breakout box on top?
I don't know, but it's probably hovering around 100, 120-ish.
The price on the mic. So I'm getting ideas here. The price on this?
$299. It has the headphone output on the side.
Nice.
What I forgot about the DGT650, by the way, is that it has a built-in battery,
Right.
which allows you a 3-hour plus on the road without any electricity. It doesn't drain the battery of your iPhone or your iPad.
Nice.
So that's it. You know, this is just new. This ships already. This starts shipping probably next month.
So as standard with this, what does this come with? It doesn't come with that, so what else does it come with?
It comes with a stand. It comes with a simplified holder.
It comes with a stand.
It comes with a tripod stand.
This stand here.
Similar, not exactly the
Okay,
same.
that's great then.
But a tripod stand, as I said, it comes with the microphone holder. This flagship model has a somewhat more better shock mount.
Right.
Then again, this is about half the price.
That's wonderful. Of course, the LCT 550 is actually one of my favorite mics.
Yeah, you use that, right?
I use it every day.
Right.
Use it on bass, use it on piano, you name it. I put it on the bass guitar.
Oh, well, it's a very all-round microphone.
Yeah, I always tell people this, and you probably hate me saying this. It's like having a 414, and it's just a general purpose. I use it everywhere.
Right.
I just know it's going to do the job, you know what I mean? But it's a fraction of the cost, so I always recommend it to people. To me, it's like there's a lot of mics around about $300, which are pretty good. But this is the first big jump up in quality for me.
Yeah.
And probably the next step is to spend nearly $1,000 to notice any real difference.
Well, you know,
Because it doesn't have as many features as some of the other mics, but the point is like most people stay in cardioid most of the time.
that's true.
Most people don't need to necessarily pad unless they're recording really loud electrics. And if they were, they'd probably use a dynamic.
Yeah.
So 90% of the time, I just use it set to 0, and I just move it around on things.
The
And it
beauty
works.
is if you have a wider room, you use 2 and they're exactly the same because they're matched. And there's no need to
That's why I put it on pianos.
Well, there's no need to order a matched pair because they're all matched.
It's always matched.
That's beautiful. But the downside, if you'd like, about USB connectivity is that the perception in the market out there is that, it's a USB mic, so it must be crappy.
Yeah.
Which is in our case obviously not the case. And that's why we need to re-educate and inform the people and actually let them use it because,
Yeah.
if you use it,
Well, I've got to get one of these from you guys so I can do that. I'm going to record a song and use it. That'll be a lot of fun.
absolutely.
Right. Well, thanks
make
for
it
showing us
happen.
around.
Thank you, man.
Thank you.
Take care.
Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you Warren Hewitt. When did you start taking lessons and when did you transition to becoming a musician?
I was obsessed with music. I was a fan of music. What happened is I was 15, I just knew I wanted to play music. I never have any money to I was spending my money on buying albums, so I didn't have any money to buy a guitar. So in true Brian May fashion, as a big fan, I went to my dad and we built a guitar. So my first guitar was what my father and I built together. And it was because of Brian May.
and I want it to be Brian May.
You're known to have worked with a really diverse group of people, and you're held in high esteem by all of these people. I mean, to gain the respect of Aerosmith,
pay
to
them.
be young, they're also paying you. But, how do you establish that initial relationship where, you're kind of two big cats circling each other in a room, and you're trying to, gain control because you're hired to be the engineer, you're hired to be the producer. In your case, you might have 5 hats that day. What's that process of getting to know the artist and building some trust?
I can be objective about it, but I don't want. Being objective about it is, I suppose, the only way it can be. The reality is like I hold myself to a very high standard. I still do ear training exercises every day. Not every day. Like I haven't done it over this weekend. I doubt if I will. But if I can't fall asleep, I put on my iPhone and I do some ear training exercises and I work. Every day I still listen to music all the time for enjoyment as well as work. I like to gain their trust by gaining their respect by being like, yeah, I can play drums, I can play piano, I can play bass, I can play guitar. I write songs, I engineer. I don't force it down their throat, but I like to be able to walk into a room and communicate with a drummer and go, oh yeah, when you did this, could you have gone like that? I don't have to get on the drums, but I can say...
You can speak the language.
I love this. So music to me is a passion, and if I make money, it's just as a consequence of doing this every single day, as opposed to, going, how can I make some money? It's so much fun putting on something you love and understanding it. It really is. Isn't it great to just put on a piece of music and go, wow, it's in B flat, and he went to here, and isn't that, oh my God, did you hear that? He just did this little diminished rhyme. Where did that come from? Just to understand that is just so much fun. Especially when you love something so much and then you start knowing more and more about it. It's just like a great journey.
I'm here with Mark. How are you, mate?
All right, mate.
All right, so Mark has some great new products. Mark is the owner of BAE, and as you know, I'm a huge fan of BAE. I've been using it since 2000. And we became friends because I love his product. That way around, not the other way around. He didn't pitch me anything. I loved it, saw him out. So you've got a couple of new pieces. You're going to tell us about
We
it?
do. The newest thing, and you can see it doesn't even have covers on the Boost and Cut, is this graphic EQ. It's transformer balanced. As you know, we always like the transformers. Jensen in and out.
Wonderful.
Just 10-band EQ, hence G10.
So yeah, this is awesome. I'm dying to try this out, so get me one as soon as you can so I can try it. This I have tried out, the B15, and it's already been featured in one of the videos when we were at Hybrid recording drums. We had one there and we used it on a mono room mic and it sounded massive. It's honestly one of the best EQs I've ever used. Tell me about it.
Again, transformer balance. We're all about transformers. Not any transformer, but Jensen, especially in this circuit, they're just phenomenally well built, sonically, superior to a lot of the stuff that's on the market. Elmer switches, there's no expense spared on this type of thing.
Yeah, this is like properly done, not surface mounted. It's not going to break.
It's all discreet. You've got two, VDC 1122s in there.
Right.
You can't fit any more in the real estate, basically.
Yeah, it's wonderful. This is a really great sounding EQ. Check out the Hybrid drum recording session and you'll hear me using it and you'll hear me freak out about how good it is. We've used it quite a few times. Used it with the Mimas on when we were trying out the Mimas with the 500 series stuff. It's an insanely good sounding EQ. I don't know why. Is there anything special about this I should know?
Well,
apart from having transformers in it.
Just the circuit itself, it was designed by Vidas.
Right.
It's kind of its own thing. It's not based on anything. Good. People will compare it to kind of an API because it's a 3-band. But it does have its own flavour. It's somewhere in between the Neve and the API, which is kind of what we're known for.
Right.
And it kind of does marry well with, the next product in line,
73.
which is the 73 MPL.
Which we love as well.
We've just been nominated for a NAMTEC award.
Nice.
Incidentally. I forget that this is still this year's product, you know what I mean? We're at the tail end of the year, but we're still a new product for this show. since last year. So yeah, that's the other thing we have.
And we're offering out one of these in a prize for a mix competition. There's just a few days left. It may have already gone by the time we do this, but maybe Mark will kindly give us another one for another competition.
Okay, so this is called the 10 DCF. You will have already known we have a compressor called the 10DC, which just stands for 10 Series Dynamic Compressor.
Right.
Speaking to the likes of yourself, thinking, okay, if I'm want to compress lower frequencies, or I don't want to compress lower frequencies, what can we do as an option? So we took the filter, the Carnhill inductor that you have in the 1073, we kind of reversed it and we made a bypass filter.
Nice.
So it's the same thing, just with this extra feature.
What do we got? What's it set to? So it's 50, 80. Oh, it goes right up to 300. So this is great. This is really nice. So this is becoming a feature that is becoming very popular and is a really awesome idea. So basically you will compress over this area. So every frequency above this. Great if you're lacking some real loads in your kick. Just sit here and go to the first setting. Even the second. If you want to get, if you're tracking bass guitar, because we know Chris Chaney loves these on bass, basically you could probably go up to 300 and let everything below 300 go through and compress above that. You'll notice a lot of, like, on my mix videos when I'm doing bass guitar, I use this kind of stuff all the time. I will sidechain. I'll only compress the lows and then bring them up, or I'll do the reverse. It's a really, really nice idea. And in a world where we live in, where everything's very digital and brash and abrasive, this kind of compressor that allows this kind of function is really wonderful. Mark's products are second to none, and we use them every single day. Thanks, Mark. We are here with Steve Jackson. How are you, mate?
Great.
Wonderful to see you as ever.
Always good.
Been a huge fan of Steve's stuff. Steve is the owner of Pulse Techniques, which of course we all know as Pultec. And you make, there's no such thing as, you make actual Pultecs. I was sitting with dinner last night at the VK event, which was very, very blessed to be asked to be there. I sat opposite Ryan, and Mike was on the other side of me. And all they did was tell me that they put your stuff on the scope with every single original one they've ever had, ever made, every restored one, every original untouched one, and yours reads not only the same but better. And he said of every single product he sold, whether you want to call it clone or reissue, yours is the only one that he stands behind as being exactly the same as the original.
That's the first I've heard of that. That's
that's
nice to hear.
Ryan's you start Ryan off, Ryan can talk about gear for hours.
Right.
I mean, it was like, we had 2 hours of gear conversation,
Yeah.
And the thing about Pultecs is, I love the sound of them because they're passive, they don't mess with the phase, they're completely musical. It's probably the only piece of, when Sound on Mix magazine says transparent and musical, we were talking about this yesterday.
Right.
The Pultec's the only thing that really is transparent and musical.
Right.
And so you make beautiful stuff. I'll stop talking.
Thank you.
What do you got going on here?
A little bit of a mix here in the rack. So the EQP1A3 is essentially the original Pultec, the EQP1A, that in 1970 was condensed down to 2 rack spaces. So this is really what most people think of when they think of a Pultec.
Yeah.
It has, the 4 corner frequencies on the low end. It has 7 center frequencies for the high frequency peak boost. And then it has 3 positions for high frequency shelf attenuate. And it has the, all the original transformers, essentially the Triad HS56 input transformer that precedes the passive EQ section. Then the Triad HS29, the interstage that follows the passive EQ section, and that feeds the line amp, which is a 2-stage push-pull based on 12AX7, 12AU7, and then feeds the Holy Grail transformer, the Peerless 217D output transformer. And that is really where I think a large part of the sound of a Pultec comes, although it really is the integration of all of these components. You can't really point and say that's what makes a Pultec sound like a Pultec. So that's kind of the base model that we start with. The 1S3 EQP1S3 was so when Gene made custom units, special units, he used the S designation, and you'll see.
Gene's the original designer and owner of the
Yeah, I'm sorry. Gene Scheps is the original designer. Started the company back in 1954 after working for RCA Labs for about 15 years, designing wide bandwidth, premium quality amplifiers. So Gene really knew his stuff.
Wonderful.
So they use the S a lot. You'll see an EQP 10S, you'll see a 1S, you'll see a 1S3, and the S just typically meant it's a special. This particular, or the original version of this, was an enhancement of this model. They tweaked the corner frequencies a little bit just to give you a little more boost at each of your selections. But the biggest difference is on the 1S3, they added additional peak boost frequencies, and then most importantly, a 5K and a 10K shelf boost. And that is just, if you love the top end of a Pultec, that gives you a whole lot of that top end. If you're using it for drum overheads, or if you've got it on the mix bus and maybe you've got an SSL that's lacking a little in the top end.
Yeah, and also I know Chris Lord Algie has this on 70 for his bottom on his SSL.
Exactly. So this is the 1S3. My friend Jack Douglas, who I met, I think around the same time I met you, our mutual friend.
One of my best friends.
Yes.
Yep.
Knew someone who actually had a pair of these original units and convinced him that it was safe to send them to me to allow me.
Yeah.
Okay. So I spent a month or so making sure that all of the tweaks that were done to this relative to this were to spec, and then we took that one step further and made this into a mastering unit. So it has
Totally
stepped
for full recall
controls,
capabilities.
and that's something that has become very popular. And this is kind of the Rolls-Royce unit. It's the 1S3, but it's the mastering version of the 1S3.
Wonderful.
And we've sold a lot of these for the mix bus. A recent modification that we've made, the original mastering units had uniform half dB per step controls on them. So the full range progressive taper option is what we call it. Still has the half dB per step until you get half rotation, but then the steps get progressively larger. 1 dB, then 2 dB, then 3 dB. And so if you want the full 18 or 20 dB of boost on the top end, you can have it. If you're tracking, if you're mixing, you want something really aggressive.
Yeah.
But you still have that precision for the first 5 dB.
That's wonderful.
To give you a lot of control. And the other benefit of these stepped controls is the tapers on the hot molded carbon pots are never exactly the same. And so you're always, 4.5 on this one, 4 3/4 or something. Because we design these and build them with precision resistors, they track each other perfectly through the full rotation. And so your stereo image stays where you've got it. You're not getting a 1/4 of a dB or a half dB hotter on the right channel than you were on the left.
That's fantastic.
So, as you know, you've had a pair of our API 2520
Beautiful,
EQP 1A3s. You've had those, maybe 4 years or something?
Yeah, they're amazing.
While.
Yeah.
And I know you did a great demo video for us on some piano tracks. And
I still use my piano every day.
Oh, it brought out, the hammers striking the keys
and the mid-range as well. The punch of the 2520s, which is what APIs are so renowned for, that drum sound incredible from APIs.
And so that full-sized unit has been very popular, but it's still fairly expensive. It's about $2,500.
Yeah.
And we wanted to get these into the hands of people that can't afford that.
Yeah.
And so I spent the last 9 months figuring out how to cram all of that down into a 500 series format.
Wow.
And the only way we were willing to do it, as with the other products, is there couldn't be any compromises. It had to meet the original specs.
What 2520s are you using?
API. They
Really?
Yes. They do not sell them to other companies, with the exception of Pulse Techniques. When I approached,
that is an indictment of how good a guy you are and how much people like you. Because I don't know anybody else. That's why I was like.
So when I approached Larry Droppa, this was back 5 years ago or so, when we were first starting to when I wanted to do the API version of the Pultec, which was, I mean, that's Gene Schenk felt like that was the future. He was transitioning his product line from the tube stuff over to the solid state, starting in the early 70s. And when I approached Larry and said, you know, API used to sell these op amps to Pulse Techniques, he said, oh, I know the history. And he said, I've been following what you're doing. We really like, you know it.
So the question is, what's the retail on them?
$12.95 a piece.
That's beautiful.
So roughly half the price of our full-sized API version.
That's amazing. All right, thank you ever so much, Steve.
Thank you
I really
very
appreciate
much.
it. Always amazing to see you.
Well,
and I love your products, and I love your integrity on them and the way you,
thank you.
You know, pretty much one of a kind.
Let's start arcing a little bit into the Fray. So your introduction to the Fray was to do drums on one of their first big songs.
On How to Save a Life, yeah. They recorded it with, what do they call them, hot rods. You know, they'd recorded it with hot rods, and then they came to mix it. Mark Endett was mixing it, and Mark had tried to mix it and was just like, you know, I can't make, he's like, it sounds good, but if you want this to be a radio song, you're gonna have to put a real drum kit on it. So the drummer flew in, I think at like 11 in the morning and left at 3, and we did like 2 takes, and that was it. You know, it was very simple.
Okay, and so this is your introduction to the band, and you're brought in for this, and obviously there was a little synergy there because flash forward a couple of years.
Well, I'd also been, before then, I actually had done a lot of other work on the record. I'd done a lot of cleanup and editing and comping of the vocals and stuff like that. And then about 2 months later, we went to the Palms. You know the Palms, they have a studio in Vegas. We flew in there and we did a cover of Happy Christmas, War Is Over.
The Maloofs.
With the Maloofs, yeah. And did a cover there. That was a fun time. That was crazy. We got there and the AC had gone down in the whole place, I think. So I remember what do they have? They have a VR or something?
I think they have a VR60 maybe?
Yeah, and the one thing you don't do with a Neve VR is not have AC running on it. I mean,
you can cook on them, yes.
You can cook on them with the AC running full blast, let alone with the AC off. And so all the headphones stopped working. But I remember it's always a good lesson. I talk about this with Jack quite a lot. I'm setting up for a kids choir, the band live, everything. I'm running around, plugging everything in, getting tones, and I don't have any headphones.
And you have 4 hours, too.
They got it fixed. About downbeat of first take, and the headphone amps came back on, which was just like hallelujah. But I remember I didn't tell anybody, and I said it with all my assistants. It's like when something goes wrong, whatever that means, when something isn't working, it's like just fix it, do a workaround, don't make a deal out of it.
I like to refer, when I'm talking to students in classes, I say, clients are a little bit like Dobermans. They'll sense fear. Yeah. If you are losing control of the session, how do you think they're supposed to feel? Because they're looking to you to be in control. So you get the session done. You have this 4 hours.
Yeah.
And then
with the kids choir.
With the kids choir. Mm-hmm. So then what happens?
Oh, this story gets better.
Okay.
I'm just going to finish the story.
Please.
So anyway, we finished the thing. It was on a Sunday. So getting a kids choir was a lot of fun. So I fly back, and then Monday morning, Apple's going to hate me for telling the story, but this is what happened. So Monday morning, I mixed
Turn off your iPhones.
Yeah, iPhones have to. So Monday morning, I mixed it, and they approve it. Tweaks, approve it. I mixed it on 8058, which was nice. So just pull it out on the 8058, a little bit of EQ.
Sounds better when it gets warm on those consoles, by the way.
Yes. And it sounded fantastic, and they loved it. Very simple. There wasn't much to it, and so we send it. We get it mastered, and it goes up Tuesday. So like the next day, it's old school. I get up all excited. I put on a pair of headphones, download the song. And I'd mixed it so that the whole song was in mono until the first chorus, singing da 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 da, another year old and you were, and so Merry Christmas, and it goes wide. Problem is it doesn't go wide, and there's no hi-hat. And I always pan audience perspective. So somebody somewhere, I don't know, this is where nobody will get offended, either mastering or Apple, somebody had uploaded somehow or another the left-hand channel twice. God bless America.
Awesome.
Yeah. And it got re-uploaded maybe 7 weeks later.
7 weeks later? Oh my gosh, that's really a long time when okay, I just did this super cool trick. I just made this go from small to large, which, okay, this is the time of going From
You know, it was
small
the
to large.
first song ever to chart in the top 40 without any radio play. It was the beginning of, they were the beginning of like the digital revolution, where it was just all downloads, all iTunes downloads, put it into the top 40. Wow. It's pretty awesome. Wow. Yeah.
So then what's the evolution then to suddenly, you're not just hired to do the drums, you're suddenly making the record, the next record.
Yeah, I think we went to, well, we can sort of segue into this because it was interesting because they wanted to do the next record, and we definitely, yeah, right, we definitely had a good time making the, you know, doing some stuff on the first album, then doing that. I'd also ended up mixing some live stuff, and I think Apple had done, they used to do the iTunes Pass. Anybody remember that? Where you'd buy for like $100 and you get like the album and then free live stuff and this, and then you download a whole bunch of stuff.
So we call that YouTube now.
Yeah, exactly. And so I'd done all this stuff for the band, and you know, everybody was very happy. So it was definitely moving in the right direction. But I think that it was interesting because when I was asked where I wanted to do it, of course I wanted to do it in LA because that's where I live, but more importantly because, you know, I know the studios and I work a lot at Sunset Sound, and again, another very well-run studio, has 2 full-time techs, you know, God bless it, you know. And I'm just going to be blunt, they wanted to do it at the plant in Sausalito. Did anybody remember that? It was the old record plant west. They had done a lot of Rumors was done there. Sly had lived there for about 3 years.
Sly had
He'd done Fresh there.
artist in residency.
Yeah.
We can't get him out of there.
And a lot of Bay Area bands in the late 70s were done there, and it had 2 8068s that were
Put together.
taped together, I think would be a polite way of putting it. And so we got there, and yeah, that's how we started the record.
And so you're on a little bit more on familiar ground, right? You're not in one of the studios you worked at every week.
Yeah.
And everything working there, or?
Yeah, that's what you're implying. Yeah, I don't mind. Honestly, you know, the great thing about working in studios when it comes to the traditional and, you know, major-ish studios that are well run is that you get in there and most of them work around 3 or 4 basic consoles, whether they be Neve or Neve clones or whatever we want to say, APIs,
API,
SSLs, but usually if you're tracking on SSL, you have a bunch of external mic pre's. I have an SSL, but I use external pre's when I'm tracking. And so this was 2 8068s, and we get there, and I'd spoken to the owner at the time, and he had assured me that it had been teched recently, and it wasn't.
Not so much, huh?
Not so much, no. Yeah.
So you're trying to figure out what channels are working, and
Well, I know with the first 5, one of them the EQ worked and the rest didn't, and I don't actually the first 4 channels didn't work, and one of the 5th one I think worked when you engaged the EQ. I think that was.
If you're working on an 80 series Neve, one of the things you want is the inductor EQ. That's one of the reasons you're on that console in the first place. So that and the mic pre, that's why you're there.
And I said to the assistant, I was like, you know, grab one of the modules out of the back and put it in the front here, and just find out, you know, whether there's other modules that work I can put out for the drums. And he's like, cool. How'd you do that?
Trouble.
So it was fun. It was definitely a battle. But again, it was like, I think we were, you know, about a week in before anybody kind of caught wind of the fact that there was a lot of issues with it. So you just got to try and work around it and make it happen.
You're in the studio. Not everything's working quite right for you, but you know you've got to get this going on. And,
right.
And what's the process you're going through there? I mean, how are you getting? You know, you've gone from just being doing one small portion of the record to suddenly you're in charge of the record. And
well, I think the thing is when you're working with any band is, yeah, you're right. You want them to have your trust, but it's more about them being excited. Your actual relationship with them, believe it or not, and this might sound really stupid to say, isn't that important. It's like if they're having a lot of fun and they're being creative, does it matter if they think that you're God's gift to something, or they just think it's a guy well, you want them to like you, i.e., you know, be able to communicate with you, but the most important thing is that you remember it's not about you, it's about them. But I think ultimately, it's not really our role a lot of the times as producers and engineers, and even to the mixers and probably the mastering engineers, is really just to facilitate. Dave Jordan has a great thing that he once said to me that he says a lot. He's like, sometimes you have to get into songs and pull them apart, rewrite them, change the key, the tempo, the lyrics, the instrumentation, you name it. And other times you just have to get out of the way of the band and help them make a great record. And the skill really is knowing when to do that. I think a lot of the time, because of our technology that we have, production and producers sometimes rely on the technology to make the record, and that dictates how the record sounds, as opposed to the musicians. So I think, yeah, it's finding that balance. I talk about it all the time, and I really firmly believe that whatever your DAW is, whether it be Reason even, or what's the one that Studio One?
Studio One Live.
Studio One Live, a lot of people I know are using.
Pro Tools,
Logic, Cubase, Nuendo, whatever it is you use, being really good at it is where you start from. Like, you've really got to be amazing.
And define that for kids who are coming up. What's the skill set that they're going to need to have with that? If they wanted to work with you or work in your world, what would you expect them to know how to do?
As far as an engineer that works with me, that should be just second. They should just have that down, so that if I say, "Hey, can you copy that over there?" It's just really because it shouldn't be part of the music.
Do you expect them to also know music, know how to read music, know when you say,
I've got really high standards.
The second bar, when the modulation.
Reading or writing music, and I don't want to offend anybody. I mean, I read and write music, but I actually don't. I don't need that every day. It's very rare I need that.
But have musical dialogue.
Definitely have a musical dialogue. Play an instrument.
So with my friend Adam Ayan, how are you, mate?
I'm doing well, thanks, Mark. How are you?
Adam is an amazing mastering engineer. I don't say that lightly, and he's over at Gateway. I met him several years ago, and he's mastered many of my things. And really a wonderful guy and a wonderful talent. And he's going to tell us about this. What is this?
This is the Merging Horus, Merging Technologies I/O device. Also stellar A to D and D to A converters.
Wonderful.
Pretty much a device all in one. Mic preamps in it as well.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
And it runs on a Ravenna network. So the beautiful thing about this thing is that you can plug microphone signal into it. It works as a mic pre, has amazing A to D converters, better than anything else I've ever heard. And then you get into a digital network, and you can bring it up in your Pro Tools or whatever workstation you like to use. They also make the Pyramix workstation, which is over in that direction, which is my workstation of choice for the end result.
So this is your I/O? This is
the I/O device that I use in my studio, exactly.
Over a Gateway. That's fantastic.
Pyramix, which you can see over here, is this really well-tuned digital editor in the mastering domain.
Right.
I mean, it's used in multi-track as well, but for me in the mastering domain, it allows me to edit 2-track, or 6-channel in the case of surround sound, really fine-tune editing, the kind of editing that we do in mastering every day.
Right.
And also has all the features and functions for outputting final masters, references to our clients, amazing sample rate conversion, all these things that are super important to me in my kind of niche world of mastering. So there's no other workstation I would use for those things beside the Pyramix. And we've been on the Pyramix for 10 years now at Gateway.
Oh, wow.
Starting with in 05, we put it in my room, and I sort of worked the kinks out, got used to it, and then we got it in Bob's room and all of our other production and editing rooms. Yeah, Bob Ludwig. And we've been using it for 10 years, and it's amazing. Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
So it's basically self-contained, so you're doing everything. You're not handing it off to another guy in another room who's then...
Actually, no, that's not true. I'm self-contained in terms of the mastering part of the process, the creative part.
Yeah.
But then the second step of creating final masters, which is our back end, we have 2 guys that are on staff with us that do that work for us. And the other beauty of the Pyramix system is that it's PC-based. And we have this really robust network where any one of our engineers can sit in their room and open up any project I've worked on and start outputting final masters while I'm in another mastering session.
That's wonderful.
That's huge for us in terms of the volume of work that we do. It keeps things going. Our guys can do the final masters, run down the final masters, do quality control for us while I'm in session EQing.
Wonderful. So we have a quick look at it.
So this is the Pyramix workstation that Merging Technologies makes, and right now we're looking at a multi-track session, which is of course not the way that I operated. I'm working mainly in the stereo domain and occasionally in surround sound. But it's very powerful to me in a number of ways. As I mentioned before, we can get into it. It sounds amazing. It interfaces with the Horus converter set that we looked at just a few moments ago, which is the best sounding converter set I've heard on the market. Interfaces directly with that in this mixer here that's part of the Pyramix system. And then within it, it's a very broad system in terms of how you can operate it, how you can edit. which for some users I've found, like, they get a little lost in how do I narrow this thing down. For us, we were able to make this thing operate exactly the way we like to use it, which is very, very powerful for 2-track editing, for doing, fine-tune edits, radio edits, sequencing of an album, the spaces in between the tracks, all those things that I do for you at the end of the process, right? And then at the end of the day, when you've approved the album and the artist has approved the album, it's very powerful in the sense of being able to make whatever number of masters, final production masters.
Now,
are required.
editing on it for you is really easy. It's
very easy,
very intuitive.
Very easy, very intuitive. Right now, this is, of course, we're at the AES booth. This isn't set up with my quick key set and my templates, but it's very fast. If you watch me edit, probably very much like how you edit on Pro Tools, where it's like a musical instrument. It's an extension of your body, and you're fast.
Absolutely.
With it, right?
So I suppose questions people would ask me, would every major manufacturer's plugin be available on it? How does it?
A vast majority of them are. A vast majority of them
What is it? Is it VST?
It's VST and VS3, I believe, is the other architecture. Let me see if I can bring that up really quick. VS3 and VST.
Yeah, I recently started. I got the blue patchwork in Pro Tools now and access VST plugins, and I realized your whole world just opens up when you can get VST plugins.
Yeah.
As much as I love what's designed for Pro Tools, the fact that other DAWs now have so, because they're not changing platforms every other week like our dear friends at Avid are.
Exactly. It's more. It's more open, and anybody that's making it for Avid is also making it VST. So you've got that plus the VST set that you can't even use.
So the fact that you can use VST, this is great. This is your preferred.
Yeah, this is the workhorse for me.
Right.
So I'm doing a very little plug-in work, I should say that, but mostly it's final editing, final master generation, final reference generation, all these things that are super important in what
this presumes the computer.
Yes, I believe so.
Okay.
Ours looks different. Ours is a big, awesome, silver-looking box. Yeah, they'll make the computer to spec. Like
they'll make the computer.
They'll put the computer together for you, which is really I find is really an important thing because we need to be up and running all the time. We can't have downtime.
Right.
We can't have to call tech support and run down the list of, well, this is what we have in our computer that we're using. They're really smart about it. They build it on their own computers. They'll put the whole thing together for you so that the tolerances are more narrow, or the options are more narrow in a way that it makes it much easier to troubleshoot if you run into a problem, which almost never happens anyways, but it's much easier to deal with in that way.
Well, thanks for showing us this.
Oh, happy to. And if I could add one more thing.
Please.
Yes. We're very fortunate in the sense that the U.S. distributor of this product now is in Portland, Maine, a company called Independent Audio.
He's based in Portland, Maine.
Based in Portland, Maine. So, and they were not the distributor when we first moved on to the platform. We moved on to this platform because it was perfect for us. Wonderful. But now the guys that sell it here in the U.S. Are right down the street, basically in between home and the studio for me. So
that's fantastic. I'm going to find out more about it. It looks fantastic. And Adam being an amazing mastering engineer, if there's going to be any magic ears in music, the mastering guy, as you know, is the last guy in the process who basically takes it over the finish line. So I have to kind of trust you.
Yes, and I'm glad you do, Lauren.
Thanks, Adam.
Thank you. Awesome.
Hi, this is the Lisson Grove AR1 tube compressor, and it's a mono tube compressor modeled after the Altec compressors from the 60s. One thing they did.
Very famous for what?
There was a band.
The Beatles, I think.
Yeah, that was them. And so they improved on the attack time, and also they added some of the original compressors were a little dark. They actually added an impedance, so you can change the impedance, and it actually opens up the sound.
Nice.
One of the really cool things, though, is it actually has a hold feature on the compression. So what you're able to do is actually work with it, and wherever you see the white there, that will hold it in between the different ratios. It also has a foot switch on the back that you can actually hit the foot switch and it will actually hold that compression point. Really? So when things come in, they don't pump as much when we're working. And that's the Lisson Grove. It's apparently an area in London. I Googled it.
It is actually, yes. I know quite well.
So I figured that out. But,
just for a bit of backstory for anybody watching this, the Altec, I have one of the original models, and I had a lovely guy, Steve Anderson, who unfortunately died recently. He was a great tech, and he modded it to do what they used to call the Abbey Road mod, which is what this is. And this is a ridiculously great sounding piece of equipment because, frankly, you can pretty much plug a mic into it and drive it, which is like part of the beauty of it. It's sort of like a unofficial mic pre-compressor all in one, sounds amazing. There's something about the outtakes, because they weren't ever really that high end compared with like Fairchild or whatever. There's something about the grit that they brought to it, which is like something you just can't get these days. And, you know, with this mod, it makes it very flexible and very modern. Because of course now we want much faster attack and release times than they used to have, because my original one doesn't have any of these features. It's, I believe it's a fixed threshold, isn't it? So you just would just turn it up and it would just compress more.
Right.
So all of these features here is pretty wonderful. It's a very unique piece of equipment. How much is this?
It's $31.95 manufactured list price.
Right. So obviously cheaper in the stores.
Yeah.
Beautiful piece of equipment.
And it's green.
And it's green. And my Altec's like a green-blue, I think. Yeah. No, it's really beautiful. They have a very, very unique sound. And you know, it's one of those things, if you're going to have one choice piece of quote-unquote vintage sounding equipment, this is definitely one of those ones I'd recommend, because I know this well and I have one of the original.
It seems to work good on a lot of things.
Yeah.
You know, it can work on acoustic guitar, acoustic bass,
right,
piano,
famous
vocal.
for vocals,
yeah.
John Lennon's vocals, yeah. So what is this again?
That's a calibration.
Ah.
So it actually, you can tweak it so it doesn't drift or anything like that.
Right.
I haven't had to adjust that too much.
Right.
Yeah, it's pretty much sets.
Yeah, this is wonderful.
But it does have a trigger from the back. You actually hook a foot switch up to it.
I love this because, you know, a friend of mine over has a 1073 BAE. He has the switch between the impedance, and I didn't really think it was going to do a lot.
It does the number one thing there.
It does so much to the mids. Like on acoustic guitars, you can really push them out like, whoa, acoustic guitars. It's a nice feature. And in these days, you know, I with a lot of guys that are working in a box and they've got like a laptop or a small, just a small setup, having just one or two choice pieces of equipment can just change your whole life.
Right.
You know, getting the signal in there. You don't have to, it'd be great if we could all have $100,000 worth of outboard, but just like maybe one Class A mic pre, one incredible sounding compressor. It's amazing what you can do now.
And this feature right here really opens it up. It's one of the biggest. You know, I mean, you even go from here to here.
Right.
You don't have to be extreme with it. You hear it all the way around because it's changing the whole way.
Wonderful. Well, thanks for sharing it to me.
Oh,
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Okay, so let's arc back to, you've got these 12 songs that are, as you said, half finished. And you're in the writing process. And there you are, kind of trying to push it along to the recording process. And how's that going? And what are you having to go through?
I think that the process is, and it's what happens with all great rock bands. It happened with the Fray, happens with Aerosmith, happens with lots of bands. Is what always gets held up is the lyrical stuff, because you'll get singers, they'll get great ideas, and they will spend days, weeks, months, sometimes agonizing over their lyrics, and that's a very personal thing. You've obviously got to encourage your artist.
It's very, very vulnerable when you put those out.
Very vulnerable, and I think Isaac's lyrics are some of my favorite lyrics. He wrote a song called Enough for Now off that record, which is an incredibly personal story about his family, and also about the fact that he's... girls used to come up to me and ask me about the Fray and start gushing about Isaac, and I'd always stop them, and I was like, who do you think Isaac is? And they would tell me, oh my God, we think he really is this great guy. He's probably married to his childhood sweetheart. He probably cancels kids all the time. He probably does all these things, and they paint this amazing angelic thing of him. And I just say to them, you know what? That's exactly who he is. Because that is who he is. We would be in Sausalito, and we'd have breakfast in the mornings, and like 2 or 3 times a week, he'd come with another young kid, and he'd come up and he'd introduce us. We'd have breakfast, all of us, like 20 people, and he'd come in, have breakfast, and then bring this kid in and go, this is my friend John. And everybody would meet John or Fred or whoever it was. And after a while, you realize you had just met that kid for the first time, and he was mentoring him or helping him with something. And he counsels kids. He's just like, he really is the real deal. Wow. So it's tough with that. That's always the thing in the log jam with a lot of records. Not always, most of the time, because lyrics are very personal. Obviously, if you're writing Baby, Baby, I Love You, Baby, and you're doing the latest, pop hit, that's a different world altogether. You're looking for great rhyme schemes and clever ways to say the same thing. Let's be honest, most pop songs are saying the same thing, and they're all trying to invent clever ways to say it and clever ways to make the music interesting and different, as long as you stay within the certain boundaries of acceptable pop music. But when you're talking about guys like Isaac, he really is that guy. He really believes in what he's singing about. This song is about his struggle with God, about suddenly becoming very successful and not really understanding what that meant. Did anybody notice anything on this? Hands up. Anybody? There's not a single plug-in on it.
You win on that one.
So this is how I recorded it. And we did record it in Pro Tools. It was recorded in Pro Tools. But that's how I recorded it. And when Michael Brown mixed it, that's what I gave him, what you're hearing. And it's weird, I just did an interview with Crystal Algae, and one of the things he said is just like he's increasingly getting records where he feels like he's the producer, because he's getting like 196 tracks, which, track count, that's obviously always been a discussion for mixers. But I think the biggest thing for him was like, it's like a lot of no decisions. Like the sound is like essentially a clean DI with a plugin on it. Or even when people are printing a guitar sound, they put the DI in as well and say, you choose how you want it to sound. And
well, I think we touched on this earlier. I think that there's a problem with a lack of commitment in making records today, because you committed to sounds when you did this. You printed them that way. You can put this up and play it. It sounds like the record. It doesn't sound like it's totally different from the record. The record has changes, obviously things in the mix process, but it sounds like the record. You can put up a session today for a lot of things, and you have no idea what it sounds like because there's no drum sounds chosen, there's no guitar sounds chosen. They haven't comped the 180 drum tracks vocal tracks and tuned them. This is a problem. How do you deal with that now?
With something like a lot of the stuff I'm given, it's usually minimal amount of tracks, but a lot of, it's not like people are getting so carried away. I think when people talk about using a lot of tracks, what it is a lot of the time in people's defense is they're separating things out in the way that they couldn't do before. I will say that. I think what gets to be difficult is when people give you a lot of tracks and they haven't decided on their blends. So what used to happen is when you pull up a Queen record, everybody's got access or can find the multi-tracks for the Queen stuff, like Killer Queen. You got that anytime 16-part harmony on one track. So they took 16 tracks and bounced to one. And so they had to commit to that mix. So I think a lot of the time is not so much the plug-in thing sometimes, was when I open up stuff and I'm just like, I have no idea what their vision was. Because there's a lot of tracks that could be blended in 75 different ways. Now, if somebody comes to me and says, I don't know how I want this to sound, can you use your vision on it? Of course, that's what you do regardless. But it is nice when people commit stuff, because it's not about the mixer, actually. It's kind of like I'm leading us down the wrong path. It's not about what the mixer thinks. It's not about what I think or Chris thinks or anything like that. It's about what you guys think as a producer or an engineer, because I don't know how I could make a record without deciding on the drum sound to be able to record the bass. And if I don't know what the bloody bass sound is, how do I know what my guitar sounds are going to be? And how do I know what the vocal sound's going to be? And how do I know how the piano's going to fit in there?
And how do you know if the record's done if you haven't heard it all together?
Yeah. It's not even about the mixer or anything at that point. It's like, if you want to make great sounding records, make decisions so that you can make another decision to improve upon that. I know with Joe Ciccarelli, I know his work really well. Like I say, we cross paths all the time. People remix his stuff sometimes. I'm always bewildered why. His rough mixes always sound better than anybody else's mixes. Sorry for those that have mixed it, but because he's got a very, very strong vision in how he makes records.